Happy Financial Aid Day.
That's right.
National Financial Aid Day tonight. How appropriate is it that we're doing this presentation this evening?
Is that true?
Yes.
Yes, it is true. It is National Financial Aid Day. The third Wednesday in October, every year. So, for those of you who don't know me, I am Marcia Burkett. I'm the Financial Aid Advisor here at Mamaroneck High School. My office, as I mentioned to the student who I put very much on the spot, is actually out the top door. It's up on the second floor, right next to the CIC. I'm here part-time, Monday through Thursday mornings. I answer emails, I answer phone calls, I answer visits. This time of year, it's nice to have an appointment, but not necessary. So come on by, send your student in if you have questions. I'd love to meet with you and answer any questions that you have. Hello, how are you? My contact information is in the folder on a lot of the documents that are in there. And for those that did not get a folder, I'm on the website. Let's see, I'm on the school directory and all of those other things. I would like to thank LMC-TV for videotaping this evening. Xavier, thank you for being here. This will be available for later broadcasts on their station, so keep an eye for that. My role here as the financial aid advisor is to communicate information about financial aid for college. A lot of that including scholarship information and scholarship opportunities. I coordinate those things for students as well. The way I tend to communicate is through email, either sending things to your students through Naviance. We'll use the one-call system and we'll put documents up on the website. So if you ever need information, you are more than welcome to try and get some off the website. And as I said, I'm happy to speak with any individuals by any normal method of communication. Let's see. Other things. How many parents here are of seniors? How many parents here are of other than seniors? Okay. And how many parents have been through this financial aid process before? Okay. Maybe a little bit different depending upon how recently you've been through the process. So hopefully everybody will have something to learn this evening and walk away with some new information. That's okay. College information is college education is actually a very large investment for you and your family to undertake, but it's also a very important one, and hope that you will consider all the possible ways that you could attain a college education. There are lots of different ways. There are less expensive colleges, there are more expensive colleges, there's part-time experiences, there's away experiences, there's commuting experiences. Work with your counselors and develop a list of schools that's appropriate for your student, and find ways that will make it the best investment for your family. Making financial safeties and financial reaches like they make academics likelies and academic reaches is an important thing to do. In a few minutes, we actually are going to get to our main event, but as I said, one of the things that I take care of here at the high school is facilitate scholarships. We have an incredibly generous local community, lots of local organizations, families, and groups that will sponsor scholarships for our students and encourage your students to participate in that process, especially come January is a great time for the local scholarships. Our most generous group is the Mamaroneck Larchmont Student Aid Fund Scholarship. They are two representatives here today that wanted to spend a couple of minutes speaking with you, and I would like to introduce you to Ann Wilson and Abby Strauss.
Thank you so much. I'm Ann Wilson. This is Abby Strauss, and my children all graduated from the high school, and we're so lucky to have Marcia. She is just a treasure. So make sure your kids get to know her, because that's where she comes in to help us. We represent the Mamaroneck Larchmont Student Aid Fund, and I don't know if you'd heard, but we just had a big birthday celebration. We celebrated 80 years. So this is a community-based, all-volunteer group, and we just get tremendous support from the community. We get tremendous funds, and we in turn give scholarships to Mamaroneck high school students, just scholarships, and they're need-based scholarships. So that's why it's really helpful for your student. In this process, we should probably be at the end, because he's going to explain to you all about, financial aid, and we are just rather small scholarships, but still very, very important scholarships. Like I said, we've been around for 80 years, and as of last year, 1 in 7 MHS seniors received a scholarship from us. And we apparently, last year, awarded over $300,000 to students. And again, it's need-based. Marcia usually funnels your students to us, and it's just part of your financial aid package. Again, it's not huge money, but it's money that makes a tremendous difference for all the students that we provide the scholarship to. I think that's, and the scholarships, we award for 2 years, 4 semesters, and the scholarships range from $1,000 to $4,000 per year. And Abby's gonna.
So basically, how do you apply? You complete an application, and the deadline is the last day in March of 2018, which is actually this year, the last school day, which is Friday the 30th, for March 30th. You can print out the application, or you can get it from Marcia, from Mr. Burkett, or on our website, which I was about to talk about, because I manage the website. It's MLSAF, so Mamaroneck Larchmont Student Aid Fund.org. And on there is the application and a lot of information about what we do, and as well as who's on the board, and there's both on the donation side and how to receive a scholarship. And there are requirements. One is to fill out the application. The other is the students come and get interviewed by the board. A few of us go into a room with the student, and it's very informal, but we do take it seriously, and we want to meet the student and understand what they're doing and why they're going to school and what they're going to do at school and then from there we actually those interviews are held in 2 evenings. We split up the applicants on April 30th and May 1st, and that's very important that you attend that they attend one of the 2 evenings so we get to meet the students. And then the awards will be determined by our board, and the students get notified by early June in a letter and telling them what award. We have a lot of named scholarships that a lot of people have donated money in people's names, either alive or deceased, or also a lot of organizations have done it. So sometimes we give out named scholarships, which is very interesting, and that's again on the website if you want to read about it. And then you'll receive a letter in early June, and then we have an award ceremony that we ask all the students to come, and the parents sit in the audience, and family members, and we present each child with a scholarship. A piece of paper. It's very exciting, it's very nice, and afterwards they have a little reception, and we do encourage everyone to attend that. And that is actually on June 11th, Monday, June 11th, and it's at the Pace Theater. So we encourage you to apply. And again, it's all from the community, and we hope to help everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby and Ann. Before I turn the program over to our main event and our guest speaker this evening, I do want to do a little housekeeping. If by some chance you do need to leave early, I'm going to ask you to go out one of the back doors, except for right now. And also, I believe he's going to ask for questions at the end. So after he is done with his presentation, we'll probably take a brief break just for people who do need to leave at that point. They can scoot out the back door or the front door, and then we'll kind of reconvene for questions, if you don't mind. But it is with great pleasure that I would like to introduce Michael St. John Turner. He has been with the New York State Higher Education Services Corporation for over 10 years. He has been on the college side of financial aid before that, so he is a incredibly knowledgeable person. I always find new information out every time he comes and speaks, and he is actually a resource that I use when I get stumped and I have to get some questions answered. But Michael.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Okay, so I'm going to use the microphone just to make sure that the acoustics are good and that you can all hear me. Earlier today, I was in a cafeteria full of seniors at a high school in the city screaming at them, so my voice is a little weakened by that. But I'm here on behalf of New York State. The Higher Education Services Corporation, New York State Higher Education Services Corporation is basically your state agency that provides all of the student financial aid programs administered through New York State, through our government, And on behalf of the governor's office, we're an executive agency, meaning that we are at the beck and call of the governor's office, and we help to administer his initiatives, including the most recently announced Excelsior scholarships. That's going to be one of the topics that we talk about this evening. But I'm not only here to highlight what we do in New York State, I'm here also to be your guide through the wonderful journey that is financial aid, through what opportunities you can get from the federal government and what's available from the colleges, and also about how to find lovely scholarship opportunities like you were hearing about your local fund, which sounds like it's a wonderful program that you should all definitely take advantage of. So as Ms. Burkett mentioned earlier, I do want to keep questions at the end. Try to speak for about 45 minutes with the slides and address a lot of topics within there. And then at the end, we'll be happy to stay and answer anybody's questions for those who need further information. So that being said, let's get started. So we all know financial aid are those programs that help us pay for college. What's important to understand about financial aid programs is, well, how do we qualify? On the one side, we have what's called need-based financial aid, which are any financial aid opportunities that are tied to the family's income and asset situation. So when you're applying for, let's say, the federal Pell Grant or the New York State TAP Grant, we're looking at your income. Federally, they might look at your assets. The colleges, if they're offering need-based aid, may be looking at both, and they may be doing this through various forms. One form that many families fill out is something called FAFSA that we'll talk about tonight that looks at your need, but some private schools use a form called the CSS profile, which is another way of them to review your financial need. So all of this has to do with need-based aid. I tend to find after many years of service in financial aid that families are very much aware of need-based aid, because most people come up to me and say, look, I'm screwed with this thing, right? I'm not. And so when they say things like that to me, I'm like, okay, they're talking about need-based aid. You're worried about your income. Because on the other side of the house, we have what's called merit-based financial aid, which acts, these programs are the exact opposite, where students are qualifying not based on their financial situation, but based on other factors. Could be academic, but it's not only academics. So yes, students who have good grades and good test scores will have access to certain programs based on merit. But it could also be talent and, athletic ability. Students get athletic aid if they go to a college and they play for their sports teams. It could be a talent-based program. If the student, for example, did an audition to get into Fordham's theater program, Fordham might give them a scholarship that's based on the level of talent the student has. You could also simply enter into contests to win scholarships. Right now, during the fall, Google holds its annual Doodle for Google scholarship contest, where all you have to do to enter is draw those Google cartoons you see as their logo on their homepage. They give students a theme, and the student can win a $30,000 scholarship to help pay for college. It's not based on your tax returns. There's no income cap. So it's just a simple program that's open to families as a contest. So I do want you to try to keep an open mind when we talk about financial aid opportunities, because it's not all based on your tax returns and your bank accounts. There are many other opportunities if you just keep your eyes open and you know where to look. Now, when I mention the terms financial aid to families, some people think I'm talking about setting them up for loans. No, we're not here tonight to talk about how to put you in debt, although some of you may have thought that as you were coming in, like, guess I'm learning about how much debt I'm going to be in tonight. It's not only the loans, there's the free money opportunities. Loans are the last thing that we give. Our goal is to try to assign the student as many grant and scholarship aid as possible. Grants and scholarships are the free money programs, but if you do get them, you always want to know the details. The first question to ask when you're getting a scholarship or grant is it renewable? And if it's renewable, how long is it renewable for? And what are the criteria to renew it? Sometimes if it's based on academics, if it's a merit-based program, it might have certain grade average or credit progression requirements. We're going to see this when we talk about Excelsior, because Excelsior was designed as a scholarship. It has in-school academic requirements that the student needs to meet in order to renew that benefit every year. If it's a grant that's based on your need, you usually have to fill out your financial aid applications every year. You have to renew your FAFSA. Sometimes you have to renew the CSS profile. And if your income changes, the amount of grant aid you receive may change. So that's important to know as well, especially if you're a family whose recent financial situation may qualify you for a lot of assistance, but then you're expecting to maybe start working again, earning more money, and that might actually decrease your future financial aid eligibility, because it does spike and goes up and down year to year if your income fluctuates like that. Work study and student loans are there to fill in the gaps. So if you don't get enough free money to pay your tuition fees, room and board, and all the other college expenses, the work study program and the student loan programs are there as options for families as what we call self-help aid. So money that you could use to help yourself to pay for college. Work study is a job program for students where they work for their college part-time. in a job that's related to their majors, interests, hobbies, whatever they want to do at the school. And they earn money to help pay their day-to-day college expenses, things like supplies, books, transportation. And it's an optional program. You don't have to take it, but it is a great program if you don't want your kids bugging you every week asking you for money. You can set them up with a job while they're off at college, through their college, and they can earn some money and learn how to budget their own finances. A little preview for the real world. Loans are the very, very last thing that we'll give you. Now, most families don't want to have to take out student loans, but many do. We know this by the $1.4 trillion in student loan debt we owe as a country, right? So there's been millions of people who have, or will be borrowing at some point for their college costs. Now, I'm not saying all of you are consigned to have to borrow loans. We don't know that outcome, but we will be talking about the federal student loan options a little bit later once we get through FAFSA, because there may be something that you want to utilize as part of your options to pay for college if you don't have the cash. Your job now is to try to find as much free money as possible. That means applying with everybody who has financial aid to offer you. So there's federal money that you can access. There's New York State money that you can access. Federal money you can get to go to whatever college you want to go to, whether it's a local college or a college somewhere upstate New York or even out of state. Federal money goes with you everywhere in the United States. New York State money only follows you to New York schools. So we'll help you with, tuition assistance and other types of programs like Excelsior. And some of our programs are designed specifically for SUNY and CUNY. And then we have programs designed specifically to help pay for private schools in New York State. But we don't design any of our programs to help you to pay for colleges out of state. None of our money is portable. So if you do decide to apply to schools that are all out of New York State, you're not going to benefit from any of the New York programs. So we do ask families to keep New York as at least a backup option for the college options, because you may find that choosing to stay in state may be financially beneficial to the family in terms of the savings because of New York's programs that we give. Some people ask me, well, if I send my kid to Penn State, will Pennsylvania give me their state money? And the answer is sure. If you move your whole family there for a year before they start college, establish your state residency, pay Pennsylvania full-time resident tax returns, you can get Pennsylvania tuition and you can get Pennsylvania state aid. So it's not that easy. Your kids can't establish residency separate from the parent. We'll be talking about those issues when we talk about FAFSA in a moment. Thirdly, you have the colleges. Colleges give their own financial aid as well. They call it institutional aid or institutional money. And this is really important when we talk about going out of state for college, or we talk about private schools where the price tag goes up for these colleges. Now, we have students that are going to great schools like NYU and Fordham and Columbia here in New York, and they're not, getting free rides from federal and state financial aid. They're getting money from the colleges. The colleges are really who's providing the biggest dollars. This is going to be important, especially for families who feel like your income is a little bit higher and maybe you think you're not qualified to get certain programs. Colleges can reach many families of different income levels. So, one of my mentors and great colleagues of mine who used to be the financial aid director at Sarah Lawrence used to tell me that she had families that made $300,000 or more annual income who were getting need-based financial aid at her school. So when we talk about the process of applying for financial aid, you'll see why this is the case, that even families of much, much higher income and resources still qualify. Now, lastly, we have the other resources. You heard about one of those earlier from the lovely folks at the local scholarship program. You want to take advantage of all those local and national and what we call outside scholarship dollars, because this money could be an X factor. It can help give families the additional resources they need to avoid having to pay out of pocket, to avoid having to borrow loans. These programs are scattered, they're far and wide, and so you want to make sure that you have a good process for looking for these programs. We'll close our conversation later this evening on some tips and advice onto how to be successful in finding those opportunities. So any money you get, whether it's federal dollars, state dollars, money from the college, it's meant to pay the cost of attending college. Cost of attendance includes things like tuition and fees, room and board, book supplies, transportation, and other expenses. Now, depending on what your choices are for college, it impacts the price. So if your student wants to stay home for college, you don't have to worry about room and board prices, and you might be able to get some more affordable college options. But if the goal is to get them the heck out of your house and have them go away for college, because we know that's not only some of their desires, but that's also some parents' desires as well, the price tag increases. So at our state schools, if they go locally, the tuition at our SUNY and CUNY colleges are pretty much equal, $66.70 per year for the four-year schools. But when you go to a away from home state school, the price tag increases to $24,000 because of the room and board and all the other expenses that go with that. New York State does not subsidize housing. We do not pay for living on campus. Our programs are designed to pay for tuition. There are some special groups of students who may qualify for some of our more specialized scholarships that could pay for housing, but these are really reserved for families, for example, who are affected by the World Trade Center attacks, students who are the children of deceased police officers, firefighters, first responders who died on the line of duty. Generally speaking, the majority of our population, our goal in New York is to help you pay tuition. College is not free in New York. Tuition is potentially free for our families. So we just want to make sure that's clear, because we've had anecdotal stories of people showing up to colleges saying, hey, move me in, put me in the dorms. I heard college is free, so sign me up. You know, everything is free now. It doesn't work that way. You still have to go through a process of requesting that program. So we'll be talking about that later. Now, public, private colleges, all those other choices will have an impact on tuition costs, in-state, out-of-state. And so what I usually recommend to families is having variety. If you're looking at all your options, keeping local options on the table, keeping New York options on the table, balancing that with out-of-state options, public and private, you'll have a good variety of offers to compare to see who's giving you the best deal in terms of a best financial aid package. Now, to apply for all these wonderful programs, it is a little bit of a long process. I wish it would be easy for me to say, here's one postcard, fill out a couple questions, mail it in, and we'll consider you for every single financial aid opportunity that's out there. It doesn't work that way, because there's many places that offer financial aid. There's many different applications you may need to complete. The first of which is your federal application called FAFSA. We'll spend some time talking about that in a moment. Then you also have your state applications, plural. New York has applications for all of our programs that are separate. So if you want tuition assistance, that's one form. If you want to request Excelsior, that's a supplemental form. If you want our STEM incentive scholarship, there's a supplement for that. So there's many different things you may need to complete to request all of New York's different opportunities. Then you also have what's required by your colleges. Some private schools I mentioned before may ask, on top of your federal and state forms, they want something called the CSS profile. So you need to be aware who needs that and get working on that one right away. And we'll talk about that form a little bit later. And then you have all other things that you're applying to. Maybe your kid is doodling for Google and working on that scholarship. Maybe they're filling out an essay for another program. Maybe you're a parent who's, you're NYPD or FDNY, or you're a municipal worker who has union-backed benefits that you can apply for. Or maybe you're former military and there's some VA benefits you may be applying for to get for your kids. Those are all other things that you would want to look into, but are outside of this general financial aid process of filling out FAFSA and stuff like that. So FAFSA is often where families start. FAFSA, by the way, stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, so you don't have to pay for it. And every year we get people calling us up saying, oh yeah, I did my FAFSA, I just paid $80 for it. Shouldn't make sense to you if you're filling out your credit and debit card information on a website that says they're the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. There are scammers out there that portray themselves, they spoof to make sure that they look like they're FAFSA, but they're not. And they end up charging you application fees to just basically steal your money. So FAFSA is a free website. There's no debit or credit card information needed. So make sure you're on the right website, which is fafsa.gov, and I'll show you a screenshot of that in a moment. FAFSA was released on October 1st for the upcoming school year, the 2018-2019 school year. And while it was released on October 1st, you may still have some time to complete it. I don't want you to get in a panic like, oh my God, it's 15 days later or whatever, or 13 days later, 17 days later, I'm going to be late. Keep in mind your colleges have specific deadlines as to whether you're applying for financial aid as an early applicant or as a regular decision applicant. If you are applying for early decision or early action at a college, you may have upcoming deadlines. I see them start as early as November 1st. So you may have to get your FAFSA in as soon as possible. If you are applying for regular decision, those deadlines are usually in the winter, January, February, so you might have even more time. So I don't want to throw you into a panic unless you are early applicant, then you should be getting on FAFSA within the next 2 weeks to make sure you get it in on time. If you want maximum consideration for all the resources the school has to give from financial aid, make sure you meet their priority filing deadline. That's usually what they call their financial aid deadline. Here's a snapshot of the FAFSA website. You're looking for the 2018-2019 form. please be forewarned that when you go into FAFSA, there's two available applications, 2017-2018 and 2018-2019. The 2017-18 form is for students who are currently in college who forgot to apply for financial aid. They could still apply up to the end of the school year. These are not your children, unless you do have a kid who's in college who forgot to apply for financial aid. Our seniors here at the high school are looking for the 2018-2019 form, the form that ties into the year that they're going to be starting college. Make sure you complete the appropriate year because the colleges will not review the 2017 form for your child because they don't have a record of them being in their college in 2017-2018. If you by accident filled out FAFSA prior to October 1st, you did the 2017-2018 form. So guess who's going to be filling it out again? You, when you do the 2018-2019 form after hearing this presentation. If you haven't done FAFSA yet and you're a first-time applicant to financial aid, there were a handful of people who said that they've gone through this process before. There's a registration process for usernames and passwords that they call the FSA ID, the Federal Student Aid ID. Students and parents each have to create these unique accounts. So the student has to register as a first-time user, make a username and password, and the parent has to register as a first-time user, create a username and password. We only need one parent. We don't need both. So if you want to play rock, paper, scissors, whoever loses has to make a parent account. By all means, it's up to you. But other than that, you can just choose either mom or dad. And so when you make these accounts, this allows you to log into FAFSA, obviously, but it also serves as your legal signature. These accounts are verified through your identity, so they verify it through your social security number. So students are applying for FSA IDs with their social security number, so are parents, and they're verifying if everything matches up, and that's basically your legal identity for the FAFSA form. You're going to be redirected to apply for these accounts if you haven't done so already at various stages of the FAFSA. So the student will be asked to create an account in the beginning if they don't have one. They'll be asked to log in. They don't have a login. They could create an account then. Parents, you'll eventually get to the parent section of FAFSA, and where you're required to log in, they'll give you a link to create your account. Or you could just independently go to the FSA ID website and just make them yourselves prior to applying. Eligibility for FAFSA is definitely an area where we get a lot of questions. Now, I'm not going to bring you through the whole entire FAFSA form because you don't want to be here with me all night, and I could talk about FAFSA for days. With eligibility for FAFSA, they're looking at citizenship, immigration status of the student. So they're going to be questions about, is your child a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-citizen? Students who are eligible non-citizens would be those who have permanent resident cards, the green cards basically, or students who have some type of protected status, like they're a refugee or they're under the asylum in the United States. Eligible non-citizens do not include students who are undocumented in the DACA program or under visas. We have a lot of students that sometimes are in our district and they're here, maybe your parents are diplomats and you're here under a diplomat visa. You cannot get any federal benefits under a diplomatic visa because you're not a resident of this country. You would have to apply for permanent residency and be approved, and then you can get things like federal and state financial aid programs. So if there are any questions about the student's individual citizenship or immigration status and how that's going to impact their ability to get financial aid, you would definitely want to make an appointment with Ms. Burkett and then see, she would kind of guide you. There are plenty of opportunities for students of all different sorts of backgrounds. It doesn't matter if they have citizenship status or not, but we do want to make sure that you're not wasting your time filling out a FAFSA only to be told, oh, you're not going to get anything because the student doesn't meet the minimum requirements. Another one of those requirements is the registration for selective service for your sons. If you will have a son that's getting ready to apply for college, when they fill out their FAFSA, there'll be a question that says, have you registered for the selective service system? They're going to say no, I've never heard of it. Then they're going to give them a box that says, would you like to be registered? Check here to register, it's going to say register me. The selective service requirement is for military draft eligibility in case a draft needs to be called. They have to be in the selective service system from age 18 through 26. It's not a financial aid thing, it's a US law thing. All 18-year-old young men somehow, some way need to know this, that when they turn 18, they need to register for selective service. Whether they're going to college, whether they're working, whether they're just sleeping on your couch, playing video games all day, doesn't matter what they're doing with their lives, they have to be registered for selective service per the US Selective Service System law. Now, they have a website that talks about these requirements, sss.gov. I get all different sorts of wacky questions about, well, what happens if your kid registers? Will the Marines come, pull your kid off of his Xbox, put him on an airplane to Syria so he can go fight ISIS next week? It doesn't work like that, but you just want to be informed as a family what it means. If you do not register, it could create problems with the disbursement of financial aid. So they'll qualify you for financial aid, but when it comes time to pay out the money, if your child hasn't registered for selective service, they could hold the payment of aid until that's cleared up. So you need to be aware of that if you're going to be receiving any federal or state aid benefits. And yes, some colleges will even hold their money until that selective service requirement has been met. So you definitely want to talk about this if it's going to be an issue with your son or in your household. Now, the other questions we get from FAFSA have to do with dependency status. FAFSA is going to run you through some odd questions about whether the student meets these special circumstances to be considered independent. What you need to know immediately is that all students who are younger than 24 are considered to be dependent of their parents. Now, this might strike odd to you because, some 18-year-olds, 21-year-olds think, hey, I'm an adult, I could do everything by myself. Maybe they don't even live with you when they're 21 years old. Remember, there's different requirements for different programs in terms of age of adulthood, age of independence. So yes, you can have an 18-year-old who lives on their own, but they're still not of the legal age to buy alcohol, right? They're not of the legal age to, if they want to be under their parents' health insurance, they could be a 24-year-old who doesn't live with you, but still getting mom and dad's health care because of the 26-year-old requirement under the ACA. So for financial aid, you need to keep 24 years old in the back of your mind. As long as your student is still working on an undergraduate degree and they're younger than 24, they're going to always need their mom and dad's information to apply for financial aid, unless they have one of these circumstances that FAFSA is going to address. For example, is your child in and out of the foster care system? Are they an orphan? Are they a ward of the court? So FAFSA will see if your child has any of these situations. One common one we may have in the district is anyone who's taking care of a young person who's not their child, but you're the court-appointed legal guardian. Court-appointed legal guardians are not required to fill out as parents on the financial aid forms. The student would be considered independent. So if you are representing a young person in the school district as their court-appointed legal guardian, not as a biological parent, then you wouldn't be a part of this process. The student would be guided to apply independently. As with the citizenship status issues, if anybody has questions about, well, how do I fill this out given my individual family situation, Ms. Burkett would be the person that you'd want to refer to because you do need the backing of people in the schools. You may need a letter from the school attesting to your situation in order to be approved as an independent student. The majority of our students are applying as dependents of their parents, and this is where we get to the parent section of FAFSA. Now, if you're keeping an eye on my slides here, you notice the colors changed a little bit. FAFSA has questions specifically for students and questions specifically for parents, and they changed the color of the screens on the online form to let you know that they're changing topics, that they're asking about parents. Please be careful because I have parents that do everything for their kids. They're filling out the FAFSA for their kid. They get the question is, well, what is your marital status? And it's on the student screen. And you marry off your children to your spouses, saying, yes, I'm married, and here's my husband's information. Because you're just kind of filling this out like it's you, and they're asking about your kids. So just keep an eye out for that. Parents, you'll have to attest for your marital status on your section, and we'll talk about the different options for that in a moment. You also have to provide your name, date of birth, social security numbers, the state of residence, household size, and number of kids going to college. These pieces of information are what sets the table for your aid eligibility. So they're looking at these different variables, how big is your family? Where do you live? How old are you as a parent? The reason why FAFSA wants your date of birth is not to send you a birthday card, but to rather see how close you are to retirement age. FAFSA's goal is to protect a certain percentage of your income and assets as being money that can't be used to pay for college. So many parents feel, if I make $100,000, I'm screwed for financial aid because they're going to think I can pay $100,000 for college. It doesn't work that way. They don't expect you to pay every single dollar that you have in your bank account or dollar that you earn from your salary to pay for college. It's going to be a percentage. As a matter of fact, it's going to be a percentage of a percentage because FAFSA is protecting a certain baseline amount of your income and assets and then assessing a percentage of that as what you can use to pay for college. So what initiates this formula are these variables, this data that you're giving them here about your family situation. They're not going to collect information about your spending. So some families say, well, an important piece of information would be the fact that I have a mortgage payment, out the roof, or that I have a lot of debt, or I have other kids that I borrowed student loans for. FAFSA doesn't factor that in. They're doing a generic review of all families, family size. Yes, you live in New York. New York is going to get a cost of living adjustment that's built into your calculation, but they're not going to do regional differences, because I was out on Long Island last night. They're talking about how expensive it is. Now I'm in Westchester County. You're talking about how expensive it is. Then when I'm at Stuyvesant next week, they're going to be talking about how rent is crazy in Manhattan. And so everybody wants their own individualized cost of living adjustment. New York State gets one cost of living adjustment, which is the highest, actually, that FAFSA allows. So, a good share of your income is going to be protected for that reason that you live in New York. Number of kids in college actually triggers a division in the formula. If you say you have more than one child in college, FAFSA is going to divide whatever you report in your income and assets by the number of kids in school. So if you have 2 kids in college next school year, 50% of your income will be reduced, 50% of your reported assets will be reduced, and then a percentage of that will be calculated as what you can use to pay for college. So some of you, questions at the end, please, if you can write it down. Some of you may have had older kids in college that are in school right now, and you're not too happy about their financial aid outcome, yet you still love to come to financial aid lectures because you're a masochist. You just want to keep hearing how you're not going to qualify. Well, now that you have 2 kids going, whatever they were saying was the expectation of your payments at that one school for the one child may reduce by 50%. Now, it doesn't mean that that school is going to automatically start raining financial aid dollars down on you. They don't automatically increase. We're going to mention this when I talk about your income. It's going to be important for you to have to write them a letter or initiate a review of your financial aid situation, so that way they can now consider reviewing your financial aid file that you have 2 kids in college. So this is going to be something that they may have to reconsider for you as a special situation. Now, the most questions that we get from parent section information is a marital status. FAFSA wants to know what your marital status as of the day you fill out the form. So what are you today? If today is going to be the day you fill out FAFSA. If you are divorced or separated and not remarried, you're a single parent who lives with your children, FAFSA wants the information of the parent that has residential custody of the child, meaning that who does a child live with primarily? Do they live primarily in their mom's house, or do they live primarily in their father's house? If they live with mom, even if mom doesn't claim the student on taxes, mom is the only parent we want in this application. We don't care who claims your kid. The father claims your kid, your neighbor claims the kid, grandma claims your kid. I don't care who claims your kid. Who does your kid live with? Do they live with their mom, or they live with their dad? And if they live with mom, mom is the person who carries the day. That's whose information we want. FAFSA will not ask any questions of the father, who's considered in this example to be the non-custodial parent. Non-custodial parents don't have to give anything for FAFSA, but we'll talk about there is a difference with private schools with profile when we get to that. Now, for FAFSA, they'll only ask about child support. Do you get child support from the non-custodial? That'll be one of these checkoff boxes you'll have to answer for. And they do want child support that you receive for all of your children, because that is considered an untaxed income resource. So they want to see how much child support you get annually for all of your kids. Now, some people say, oh, we don't have a really, determined custodial parent based on residential custody because, me and my ex were best friends. We live across the street from each other. We split custody. Johnny sleeps one night with me, one night with him. They go back and forth, 50% exact science. Well, a year doesn't equally divide by 50%. So what do you do on that middle day? Johnny stays in the house till 11:59 a.m. and then at 12 p.m. he goes across the street. But you say it's to 50% to exact science. If you tell us that, we want to look at both parents' incomes, and we will take the parent who has the lion's share of income and assets. Now, usually when we say that, people walk it back and say, oh, no, by the way, the student lives with mom, and mom happens not to be working right now. It's a real sad situation, but that is the custodial parent of the child. Who does your child live with most of the time? Their mother or their father, or who earns more income? You tell us. So those are the cases for single parents. 2-parent households could be represented by parents who are married living together, parents who are unmarried living together. If both parents live in the same house, they don't care if you're married, unmarried, love each other, hate each other, best friends, enemies. Mom lives upstairs in the light, dad is in the basement with no windows, and you don't see each other. He has his own little entrance out the storm cellar, comes out for work, retreats at night. Scares the kid for Halloween, shakes the storm cellar doors. Whatever it may be, if both parents live together in the same household, both parents file together. Even if you don't share your income taxes, we have parents who do married filing separately, parents who aren't married who file as head of households or single. They don't care what you do financially in terms of tax filings. You have to report joint income by adding up your financial statement, your statements, and representing the incomes of both parents. Same thing if you're remarried. If you're remarried and you have a step-parent in the household, they are required. Of course, they should be on your taxes if you're remarried. If you're married filing jointly, they want the combined income of a parent and a step-parent. Now, if you are living with someone who's not the parent of your child, and the plan maybe is to eventually get married, don't do anything foolish like that until after your kid graduates from college. Because if you do remarry somebody, they're going to be on your child's financial aid forms, and that might screw up a good thing. So right now, let's just keep this thing a good thing. You know, I'm committed to you, you're committed to me. We'll live together. We'll get your kids through college, and we'll talk about marriage after they graduate. Now, income questions are related to the 2016 tax forms. The most recently available tax return that you have at that time is the 2016. Extensions are up, so we're hoping that you have your taxes in if you had an extension. Or if you plan on filing late past the extension, then whenever you file those taxes, those are the taxes that they need. If you didn't file taxes, we sometimes have low-income families that are, getting disability payments. They don't file taxes. It's an untaxed disability pension. We would just want to know then that you don't file taxes. If you tell FAFSA, I'm not working and I don't file taxes, the FAFSA will skip the remainder of the income questions. Now, it doesn't mean you get to skate now, you're a low-income parent, you get all this free money. They basically, FAFSA turns the process over to the colleges to verify, well, what does your family live off of in terms of financial support if you're not a working parent. So you'll be put through this audit process that we call verification, where the college will want, disability statements, whatever kind of income you get to support yourself. Even if you live with grandma and grandma's paying all the bills, they'd want a letter from grandma. Whatever it is for a non-working family, they just want you to document how you're supporting yourselves. For working parents who file taxes, it'll all be given on your tax returns. And so there's a process, we'll talk about it in a moment, where you could download those tax figures. We call this retrieval, in order to fill out these important questions about your income. It is based on 2016 income and the tax year and the numbers that are reflected on those returns. We know that that's a past year. This year you could have experienced an income change. You might have lost a job. Maybe you plan on retiring. Maybe not this year, maybe next year. At any point, if your income changes, your FAFSA is locked in, but you're not left without any options. What happens is you have to contact the college financial aid office. They can review your FAFSA, and if your income is dropped dramatically, they can actually make an adjustment. They could do a forecast of what you're making going forward. This can be a change that happens this year. It could be something that happens unexpectedly next year. It can happen in 2019 while your kid's in the spring semester of their freshman year. At any point your finances change, submit the form the way they want it. You're going to write a letter to all those colleges, make copies of it, attach proof of what this situation is, and they can actually make these adjustments. Now, other adjustments that they can make include things like if you had a one-time distribution of income on those 2016 tax returns, that's not something that's reoccurring and we won't see it in future years. So let's say a relative passed away, left money to the family, or you had to take out some money, you took money out of a retirement fund to float you in a hard time, and that was included in your AGI. Anything like that, that could be reviewed by the college, and they could remove those one-time income events and try to give you a baseline evaluation of what your year-to-year income truly should be. Some things we review and some things we don't. So I get a lot of municipal workers, police officers, firefighters saying, oh, my OT, my OT, my OT. Overtime we can't adjust because you can't guarantee you're not going to work even more overtime next year. Unless you could get a letter from your employer to say we no longer give overtime. I haven't seen the city do that for police officers. So we would not make adjustments for those things if you can't document that it was only a one-time event. You'll see this when you approach the schools. I tell all parents, approach the college, tell them your financial situation, whatever it is, see what they could do within this process. They have the ability to override the FAFSA. I mentioned earlier that if you file taxes, there's a way of retrieving it. Please follow the instructions carefully within FAFSA. They will guide you to this thing that's, it'll say link to IRS. They call it the IRS data retrieval tool. When it works, it will download the tax information for you. All the lines that are needed from your 1040 forms will be imported to your child's FAFSA. meaning that you don't need to be a CPA or know anything about taxes. All you need to do is follow some instructions, put in your username and password, and they'll download these taxes for you. It's beautiful when it works. It does have limitations. The first of which is when there's two parents that file separate taxes. It doesn't add up two taxes. Parents who have had identity theft issues in the past with the IRS, you know, the IRS has been hacked more times than I can remember. And so many people sometimes get an error on the IRS data retrieval tool that they can't retrieve it. And sometimes it's related to protections that they've put up behind the scenes. Whether or not they've notified you that you've been hacked or not is another question. But sometimes it's because of that. Sometimes it just plain old doesn't work because we love technology, but it just doesn't work. But when it does work, it is the way to go. If you have to enter your tax information manually, they will give you instructions on what line numbers they need and where to look on your tax forms to get the numbers that they need. But it does open you up for verification. Remember, verification is this audit, meaning that the colleges may not trust the accuracy of what you reported to them if you put the numbers yourself. So just be ready to send tax transcripts to the colleges if they need them. If I have to manually enter my tax info, I should also behind the scenes request a transcript of my 2016 tax returns and have that ready to submit to the college financial aid offices upon request, because they may pick on you about this. Even if you did it perfectly, they may still select you for this review called verification. If you downloaded from the IRS, they can't pick on you because you didn't put the numbers, the IRS did, and so they'll trust the accuracy of that information. Assets. I was joking a little bit earlier that this is where I always get thrown off of the rails from my desire to get home at a decent hour when I do these many, many financial aid nights. We talk about assets with families, and just this phenomena occurs where just parents start to, you get this pit in your stomach, and you're just like, my bank accounts, my property, they're going after me. Now here's how it works. The first thing is take a deep breath. Not all of you have to answer questions about assets. They first look at your income, and if you're determined not to have such a high income, remember, based on all the variables, your age, where you live, how many kids going to college, you may see a wonderful get out of jail free card that says, would you like to skip the questions about your assets? If you get that question, say yes. Don't feel guilty like, oh, should I tell FAFSA about our bank accounts? Skip the questions. Some of you may get an asset test where they give you a dollar amount. They say, does the parent's assets currently exceed $19,433 or some random number? If your assets, and they have a link on assets, you can see exactly what they're referring to, but I'll explain it in a moment. If they're not higher than that number, you can bypass the asset questions. Some of you will not be so as fortunate, and you'll have to answer asset questions. There are 3 lines on the FAFSA about assets. The first line says, give us the total value, the current value of your cash, savings, checking account balances. Current value means the day you're doing the form. So if today's the day I'm doing the FAFSA, what I do is I run to my bedroom, I flip over my mattress. That's where I keep all the stacks of cash. I don't use a box spring or anything like that. I use cash because it's great for your posture. Now, I count that all up, and here's my cash. I log into my bank account applications. What are my savings and checking account balances? Oh, wait a second. I got paid today. I'll hit save on my FAFSA. I'll tell my wife, hurry up, let's pay some bills. Let's go shopping, go to Target, go to BJ's, go to Costco, buy things, let's do the Christmas shopping. Let's get it all done now. And okay, I'll resume FAFSA a couple days later. Today, my current bank account balance is, so you're allowed to spend your money. If you have a significant amount in your checking account because you're planning on, I don't know, remodeling the kitchen or something like that, pay a down payment, do something now to reduce that balance, and then report the current value of it a few days after you've made those payments, right? So you are allowed to spend your money. The second line of asset questions will be investments in real estate, and there's some important exclusions here. Tax-deferred retirement accounts, IRAs, 403B, deferred compensation, pensions, 401k balances, annuities, life insurance, all excluded. They don't want that in your investments. Please do not inadvertently tell us what your 401k balance is, value. Now, the FAFSA will ask for whatever pre-tax contributions you made during the tax year that they're reviewing. So they'll tell you, look at your W-2 box 12, codes D, E, G, and give us what the pre-tax contribution was. But do not tell us the market value of your entire retirement nest egg. They don't want the market value. They just want what you contributed in the 1 year related to the tax return. Now, real estate also has a protection. Do not tell them about your primary residence. So if you're a homeowner, It's the only home that you own. It's your family home. You live there with your kids. You don't do anything like rent your home out as Airbnb, so where your home is not a home, it's a hotel. You know, and like 95% of your property is where your guests stay and you hide in a closet while they're all running around your house. If you do not invest your primary residence, it's your own primary residence, it's off limits. They don't care how many millions of dollars it's worth, whether you owe debt, whether it's paid in full, you have a lot of equity, you took out a second loan on it, doesn't matter. It's not looked at, it's not assessed. Only properties outside of your primary residence would be considered real estate for FAFSA, and you'd have to value what those properties would be worth if you were to liquidate the asset and pay off any of the outstanding debt. So if you own let's say a condo in Miami, it's worth $100,000, you owe $90,000, you just bought it, then it only has $10,000 in equity. That's really what you're reporting on FAFSA as your real estate net worth, is that remaining $10,000. If you and your sister went in on that property and you're a 50% owner, then it's not $10,000, it's $5,000, because you only own a 50% share in that said property. Some people ask me, well, how do we assess property values? The most basic way is looking at property tax assessments. So what is the town, county, city, wherever the property is, what are they valuing, saying the value of that property is? And that might be a good way of trying to document what your property value is. Now, other investments that they're really looking for are things like savings bonds, mutual funds, money market accounts, things that are not in a tax-deferred retirement savings account. And yes, investments include your 529 college savings program. Oh no, we save for our kids' college, now they're going to penalize us. Well, no, they're not. They're looking at a small percentage of it. Now, they're going to consider it a parent asset. That's the first thing you need to know. First thing to try to give you some comfort about this is I'm a 15-year financial aid professional who has 2 small children, and I have 529s for them. Now, why would I do something as so stupid to start 529s if it was going to be a problem? Because it's not a problem for financial aid. Most of us who work in financial aid usually save in 529s because of the tax benefits and other perks of the program. The first perk that you have is that it's protected in the parent assets. Remember, they're not looking at 100% of what you have saved in this 529. They're looking at a slice of a slice, a percentage of a percentage. If you have 2 kids in college, whatever you report for those 529s will be divided in half, first of all. Then you live in New York, you're an older parent, you have a big family, whatever it is, it's going to reduce the value of the 529. The remaining value of your asset that you have to report, they're going to assess 5.67% of it as what you can use to pay for college. So let's say we started at $1,000 in our 529 and we have all these adjustments behind the scenes and they get it down to $100, out of which your penalty for saving for college is $5.67. So it's not really a nightmare scenario to have had started a 529. The question I usually get from parents is, well, what if grandma or another relative or my nice next door neighbor started the 529 for the kid? Well, that answer would be, well, then it doesn't go on FAFSA because it's not your money. It's not your child's money technically because the account owner is not a parent, not the student, it's some third party. You wouldn't report it. Now, before you jump up in the air and click your heels like, smart move, see, I told you, honey, we did a good job having grandma hold all the 529s. Well, remember, the IRS always has their way of getting their last laugh. When grandma distributes the money to the child's college, it's considered other untaxed income gifts or monies paid on the student's behalf. Meaning if somebody just gave you a nice big fat juicy gift to pay for your college, if it's past the gift tax penalty, your kid might have to file tax returns for it. If it's under that, your college is going to expect it to be reported in next year's FAFSA as a distribution of untaxed income to the student, meaning that a contribution will be assessed from whatever distributed from grandma's 529 in the future aid year. So there'll be a future aid year penalty. Now, one thing you could do to avoid this is just not have grandma disperse the monies until later on in the student's college career. Senior year, you're not filling out for FAFSA again. They're not going to be going back to school. They're graduating. A lot of people say, well, oh, what about graduate aid? If any of you have gone to grad school, like I have, you know financial aid for grad school is non-existent. Student loans, fellowships, assistantships. There's not really very few need-based programs, so I wouldn't worry too much. Or you could just have grandma not distribute it for college. You can have her disperse it for grad school. You can use 529s for grad school, undergrad, any other kind of trade technical schools. So you do have options when it comes to paying out 529s. With a parent 529, I usually advise use the monies right away, especially if you're going to be borrowing at some point. You want to delay borrowing until later years of college. So you want to liquidate the asset as soon as possible. That way, when you renew financial aid, it's not a part of the family contribution anymore. The monies have been used. Now, the third asset question is business values. And business values only need to be reported if you have a business that employs more than 100 people. So there's this small business protection in FAFSA. So if you are a consultant, self-employed individual, or you do own a business, 5 people work for you, or you work for you and you're a business of 1 employee, you don't have to report anything about your business. We don't need your business property values, business account values, all of that that's owned and held by your business is off limits for FAFSA. You would put 0 in that third line for business values. Now, these same questions are asked of students, and there's a much remarkably different approach how they value student money versus parent money. When students report that they have assets, cash, savings, checking, investments, they are automatically assessed 20% off the top of the asset as money that could be used to pay for college. It is not a good thing to have assets in students' names when they're applying for financial aid that's need-based, because colleges expect that they liquidate the asset within 5 years to pay for school, even if they don't have access to the principal. Remember I said they always get their last laugh, right? So if you threw all the money in a trust fund, oh, they can't touch it till they're 58 years old. That's great, but you're going to be representing 20% of that principal value of the trust every year out of your pocket, because they're going to be expecting you to report the trust on the FAFSA as a student-owned asset that they'll get when they're 58, and they can use 20% of it every year to pay for college. Borrow against it, you pay out for it. It's going to be represented in the contribution. So, great tip for financial aid purposes, your kids need to be broke when you're applying for financial aid. Like Linton buttons out of their pockets broke, because they're much more aggressive about calculating kiddie assets than they are about parent assets. Because remember, parents, you have responsibilities, you have families, you have all these expenses. Children, they're like, hey, you're going to college. You have $100,000 in a custodial bank account. Guess who has $20,000 a year to pay for school? Your kid does. So that's how they're going to view this. You survive FAFSA, you get confirmation. Please do not close this page. There's some important information on the confirmation page that you need to review, and I'm going to highlight some of this information in the following screens. One thing I'll say is one of the next steps is the copy button. If you have more than 1 child in college, you could do your oldest child's FAFSA first, and there's a copy button on this confirmation page which lets you start your younger child's FAFSA without having to start from the beginning. It helps you to submit it faster. An important thing I want you to look out on the FAFSA confirmation page is the EFC, Expected Family Contribution. This is a guideline, a dollar amount that they're going to provide to the colleges to say this is what the federal government believes based on our assessment of this family's income and assets, that they can use of money that they can access to pay for college. So I've been doing this for many years, and I ask parents all the time, well, what do you think you could pay for your kid's school? What do you think most parents usually say to that question? 0. I have nothing. I have so much expenses, I can't pay for college. Well, hopefully it's 0. Maybe it does turn out to be 0, in which case you can point to your kids, see, I told you, we don't have any money to pay for your college. Maybe you were expecting it to be 5 or 10,000. It might come out to 3 times that. You might get 30,000 as your contribution. What does this number mean? This number means that any college you apply to is going to look at this number to see, does this family need our assistance? Do they qualify for need-based aid? If your EFC is higher than the cost of that college, you will probably not qualify for any need-based aid. This is need-based, not merit. Your kid may still get a great scholarship because, I don't know, they could throw a football 100 yards. That's a separate process. But for financial need, if your EFC is 30 grand and you're sending them to a state school, which costs 20 to 25 grand a year, don't expect any need-based grants or anything like that from the school, right? Because that's a school that's under your contribution, something that they believe you can afford to pay for. Well, how about NYU? NYU is running about $75,000 a year. If you have a $30,000 contribution, it might seem very high to you, but NYU could give you $45,000 in need-based grants. Now, you definitely want to apply for financial aid for this reason, because I have some families, like we said, I mentioned my colleague at Sarah Lawrence, whose families earn $300,000. They might have a $50,000 contribution that they could pay for college, but at her school, which costs like $85,000 a year, those families are getting $20,000, $30,000 scholarships and grants based on need because their college price is so high and because they requested financial aid. But some of my families here who have that income will say, well, what's the point of doing FAFSA? I'm going to skip it. Well, the point is, if you fill out 0 financial aid forms, you qualify for $0. $0 means you get no discount against the school. You're going to be the family that pays the full tuition, the full room and board. So it always is worth it to apply to find out. Now, if your contribution is $200,000 a year, then I haven't found a college that costs more than that annually. And of course you can say, look, see, I told you we're not going to qualify, but we really only know when you apply. You'll also know when you apply what money you can get from them. From FAFSA, there's this Pell Grant program they have. It's about a little short of $6,000 per year. Usually reserved for the middle-low income family per the federal government. Here's some news for you. You may not be considered a middle-income family as much as you believe you are. Us New Yorkers are quite spoiled. Remember, federal government is looking at us nationally, not microcosm in New York, right? New Yorkers might say, oh, we earn $125,000 a year, we're middle income. Well, if we moved you to Mississippi, you'd probably be in the 1% of income earners in that state. Federal government looks at families that make less than $60,000 a year as target families for their programs. That's what a solid red, white, and blue middle income family should be earning across the United States, according to the federal government. So the exact number was like 59,000 and change on the latest data that we got from the feds. So if you make 4 times that, federally, you're not a middle-income family. You're probably not going to qualify for any federal grants, but you still could get things like the student loans. And if you have need, you could get work study. Now, work study, remember, you have to request it on FAFSA. There'll be a question on FAFSA, do you want it or not? The loans they'll offer as estimates, and those estimates would then be confirmed by the colleges when they send you the financial aid decision. The financial aid decisions are usually issued to students who apply for early decision when they're admitted sometime in the winter, or for regular decision in the spring, March, April, they get back to you, and then you'll see which loans they want you to borrow. Students can borrow from the Stafford Loan Program, either from the subsidized or unsubsidized or both. Subsidized means it's interest-free while they're in college. It's the better student loan to take. Unsubsidized means they charge interest when the money disperses. The student doesn't have to pay their loans while they're in college, but unpaid interest will accrue on the balance and will be capitalized when they enter repayment, meaning that they charge interest on interest, to put that in English for you. The PLUS loan program is for parents. PLUS loans belong to parents. A mom or a dad has to borrow that. Now, why do we need a PLUS loan? Well, because they don't let your kids borrow an unlimited amount of money in their name. Their loans are not credit backed. There's no, it's an unsecured loan. So they cap them. The first year freshman student, you might see a maximum loan offer of $5,500. If you need 20 grand to borrow for college, 5 goes to the student, but 15 would be expected of the parent. And you'll see these breakdowns when the college offers the loans. At this early stage of the financial aid introduction, I don't like to get into the details of loans, interest rates, repayment periods, will there be forgiveness, won't there be forgiveness. I don't like talking about those hypotheticals, but I also don't like talking about interest rates because your interest rates will be reset July 1st. The student loan program resets interest rates every year July 1st before the college year starts. So today's interest rates will not be your child's interest rates on these loans. And the terms and conditions are always subject to the political process in Washington. So you want to make sure that you're always familiar with forgiveness programs, repayment programs, and all these other things, because there's a lot of talk now with the new administration about revamping how they approach student loans on the federal government side. What I like to talk about is how to get more free money. So we go back to your FAFSA and we're on your confirmation page, and now it says, congratulations, you're ready to submit your FAFSA. And you submit the FAFSA and you get this link that says start your state application. So now we're going to transfer you over from your federal form to your state. If you did your FAFSA already and you missed this, it's gone. You can't get it back. You have to wait 5 to 7 business days for the students to get an email to be invited to apply for New York State financial aid. But if you are lucky to click the button, you can do your New York State financial aid application in the same sitting as you're doing your FAFSA. So you can knock out 2 birds with 1 stone. We have this process because we want to make it really easy for families. We can't make you read, so if you missed the link, because you missed it, you do have to wait till we give you that email. So be aware of that, and then we'll let you apply at a later date. This payment application is the gateway to all New York State financial aid programs. We're going to consider you immediately for one of our programs called TAP. Now, I'm not going to walk you through this entire application because it's very basic, but I'll give you 2 important pieces of information about it. The first is that students need to make an account as a first-time user. Parents are not required to make accounts with us. Remember, that's different than FAFSA. The other important thing to know is FAFSA allows you to submit multiple names of colleges when you're applying with them, so you could be considered for aid at all these different schools. New York is going to ask you for the student's top choice New York college. We're not going to take more than 1 name of a college. Now, why do we do that? Your kid's considering 50 colleges in New York. How do we apply for financial aid at all these schools? What we say in New York is we need to know what you're qualified for based on the type of school that your kid wants to go to. Is it a public? Is it a private? Is it a 2-year? Is it a 4-year? We're going to offer you programs tailored to the top choice of the student. So if the top choice is Cornell, we have programs like Excelsior, the Enhanced Tuition Award, we have TAP, we have things that we offer specifically to Cornell that we wouldn't offer, let's say, at NYU. There might be more limited programs. So we need to know what is their top choice. Now, if they don't get into that top choice, you're allowed to return to the application at a later date and update us, remove the name of Cornell, you didn't get in there, okay, what's the second top choice? And then we can reevaluate what we're offering based on that next choice. Tuition assistance has been around for 40 years in New York. It's the original tuition-free program in New York State for our lower income families. We approve families for tuition assistance who are making about $80,000 or less, so it doesn't reach as many families as we hope. So we do have complementary programs, including the most recently added Excelsior and Enhanced Tuition Award programs. And then we know we can't reach all families of all incomes, so New York State offers merit-based assistance to families of any income with our STEM incentive and other incentivized scholarship programs. We have many more that are listed here. Tuition assistance is the first thing we'll look at when we assess your income. If your income AGI is under $80,000, New York State does not look at your assets for our programs. We don't care how much your houses are worth, your bank accounts are worth. Does your adjusted gross income meet the cap for our programs is really the only question we're looking at. If your AGI is under $80,000 for a family that's sending less than one child to college, one child or less to college, the FAFSA the TAP application would qualify you for tuition assistance to allow you to receive up to $51.65 in free money that can go to a public or private college in New York. If your income is considered low or you reach the top amount of the grant, you get the full $51.65. We add a bonus credit at SUNY and CUNY that will make your tuition free. So we've had over the years many low-income New Yorkers who get the full TAP grant with the credit that they have zero tuition. Now we know not every family makes less than $80,000, so we have Excelsior now as an additional program, which is a scholarship opportunity for families of greater income to try to get free tuition to send your children to a SUNY or CUNY. So Excelsior will look at what you are already getting from FAFSA, from TAP. If your tuition is already being provided for, you can't get double free tuition in New York State. So we had some people this current school year who applied for Excelsior who got a full TAP grant. Their tuition was zero, and then they went on and applied for Excelsior. They asked for another free tuition. We can't give you two free tuitions. If your tuition's already free from TAP, you're not gonna get free tuition on top of that from Excelsior. You can't stack the free tuition benefits. We don't pay for room and board, remember, with these programs. These are tuition discounting programs, not room and board discounting programs. To qualify for Excelsior, we look at your income. If your AGI on your 2016 tax return was at 110 and under, you would qualify to get Excelsior for the 2018-19 school year. Excelsior was introduced as a program on a 3-year rollout. Your seniors are in the second year of the 3-year rollout. The third year of the program is next year, where we'll be looking at 2017 taxes, and we'll be taking families at the promised 125 and under AGI level. Now, it's your adjusted gross income. It's not your net income, and it's not your assets. It's your adjusted gross income on your taxes. If you meet the AGI, you qualify for the benefit for as many kids as you need to send to a state school or to a city university. They could all get free tuition. It is not a scaled benefit, meaning that if you make $109,999, you're going to get less money than somebody who made $100,000. You're going to all get the maximum free tuition. But we will prorate Excelsior if you're already getting some other benefits. If you're getting TAP, let's say for $2,000, your Excelsior scholarship would be the difference of what's not being covered by TAP. So we'll fill in the gaps. The Excelsior is meant to fill in the gaps, but it is not meant to spill over to room and board. Now, if you don't get it this year because your AGI in your 2016s were, let's say, 117,000, doesn't mean you're locked out of the program. You can reapply for it in your child's sophomore year under your 2017 tax return, and we would pick you up in sophomore year, junior year, and senior year moving forward. Now, we also have the sister program to Excelsior called the Enhanced Tuition Award, which is for private schools in New York. The private schools have to participate. There's some details of the program that we made it participatory for the colleges. It's not mandatory, so not every school offers it because of the nature of the program. But for you guys, it has the same income qualification as Excelsior. You have to meet 110 for the 2016s or 125 on the 2017 taxes. And the private school could then, with New York State, we can give a $6,000 added on grant to whatever else you're getting from the college to help pay the tuition at that private school. Now, Cornell offers both of these programs because they have their private program for the Enhanced Tuition Award, and they have their land-grant colleges with Excelsior. So, families there can apply for either or, depending on what major, what program the student is doing there at Cornell. But not every private school is in the program, so we do list our school list on the state website. The list will change because when we introduce this application to families later on this school year, along with Excelsior will be introduced to you later on in the school year. We will have a list of those schools that are participating for next year. So what you could find on our website are the list of schools that are in for this year, but next year's list may be different. It may be an increased amount of schools because we had a lot of interest for schools to come on board for the second year of the program. Excelsior and the Enhanced Tuition Award have to be applied for through a supplement that we will offer to families later on in senior year. While you've initially requested financial aid from New York State through our main portal, we'll have that on file and we'll be able to solicit you, we'll email you to let you know now Excelsior is available, come out and request that. Excelsior and our special programs have certain details that need to be agreed to outside of the general financial aid application, and we'll talk about those in a moment. So it does require an initial supplemental application for you to request it. Now, what if you make $300,000 a year AGI? Do we give you nothing? Well, no, you could try for our merit-based programs. Our merit-based programs have no income limits on families, but they do have academic requirements. For example, one of our many programs, this is one I'm going to highlight, it's not the only one. The STEM incentive says if students graduate in the top 10% of their senior class and their goal is to go to a state or city university to study in science, tech, engineering, math-related majors, and they want to live in New York, they want to be in the STEM-related fields as their career here in New York State, we could provide them free in-state tuition scholarship to go to any of the SUNY or CUNYs to pursue those degrees. The sole qualification to the family is the student graduating in the top 10% ranking of the senior class. We don't determine that, the lovely folks at the high school determine that, and we don't get into the nuances of how special your individual snowflakes are, your children are all wonderful. And we don't get into the business of slamming one school over another, because you'll slam your neighboring school district because your school is more, I don't know, you have a tougher curriculum than they do. When I go to Stuyvesant next week, they'll slam all of you guys saying how their curriculum's the toughest in the entire state. So I always hear from schools trashing another about how hard your school is over their school. We don't care. You apply. The supplement is actually available now for STEM on our website. And we will send your child's name at the end of the year, at the end of the school year, to the school, and they'll give us a thumbs up or thumbs down. Did they graduate in the top 10% ranking of their senior class? It's final ranking, not junior year. So your kid may be in the top 10% now, then they come down with a case of senioritis, and they fall out of the top 10%, and somebody else's kid will get the benefit. If you take any of New York's special programs, just be aware of our requirements. Excelsior, Enhanced Tuition Awards, STEM, our other scholarships, all have individual academic and post-graduation, post-award requirements. The Excelsior Scholarship was planned to give to students, not to give your kids a free tuition ride to any state school so they could party for 4 years, maybe go to school, maybe not, maybe graduate, we don't care. We do care. We ask that all Excelsior scholars agree in writing to graduate on time from college, meaning that you have to be on a 4-year pathway to graduate from school, which we will evaluate every year, and the minimum, we want students to earn 30 credits per year to be advancing to graduate college on time. If your child fails by the end of their first year to earn 30 credits, and the year would cover any semesters within the year, so that could be fall classes, spring classes, summer, winter. If by the end of the year they haven't earned their 30, they're out of the program with no second chances, unless they have special circumstance, like, oh, I got sick, or, I had to stop school for this reason. If they just failed to do what they needed to do, they'll be out of the program, and next year there'll be no free tuition, there'll be no Excelsior. So you have to commit to that. The second commitment is when they're off of the Excelsior Scholarship, whether they fail out of school, graduate, whatever, they have to live in New York for the same period of time that they received the benefit. So let's say they complete college for all 4 years, and they will now owe us a post-award residency requirement of living in New York for 4 years. We don't care what your kids do during those 4 years. They could sleep on your couch for the next 4 years, do nothing with their lives, as long as your couch is located in the great state of New York. Or they can work. If they work, we would ask them that they work in New York State. We don't want them to have their degrees paid for by New York and their jobs to be out of state, benefiting the local economies of another state. We'd ask that it benefit our economy. We're also we also allow for the students to do grad school in New York, and that would also count as time served for residency in New York State. So let's say they go from SUNY Albany to Columbia Law School, and they're going to spend 2 years, 3 years in the law school program. Well, when they graduate with their law degree, they'll just owe us 1 more year of being in New York, and then they can move wherever the heck they want. If they get accepted to grad school out of state, or they have an out-of-state opportunity, we will postpone the requirement for a certain period of time. So if they get accepted to Harvard Law School, we'll say, okay, we'll give you 3 years, complete Harvard Law. Then when you get your law degree from Harvard, come back to New York, be a lawyer here, make a lot of money in New York State for the next 4 years. And then after 4 years, you'll be free to do whatever you want. Some students will say, forget you guys in New York, thanks for the free tuition, but I'm out. If they leave, if they go to California, say they get a job with Google, but they don't want to work in the Manhattan office, they rather work in California, then they can do that. But we will ask to be reimbursed the money. Any money we gave the student where the student didn't live in New York for the equivalent period of time has to be reimbursed to the state. We don't charge interest. We're not asking for money to be made off of your kids. We're just asking for our scholarship money back. We will prorate it based on how long did they stay. If they stayed 1 year, then they owe us 3 years back of the scholarship. So that's the give back to New York. The goal is to give free tuition degrees to improve New York's local economies, not to improve California's economy or Connecticut's economy or Jersey's economy. This is a New York incentive, and we're hoping to incentivize students to stay in state. So if you feel so inspired to apply for our very lovely programs, our state website, hesc.ny.gov, is where you want to go. And that's where you want to do the research, apply for the supplements if there's a supplement required, and see all the details. And our programs do have contracts. Excelsior has a contract that if you do accept the program, we ask that these terms be agreed to in writing with the student. Don't forget about your colleges. Maybe your target college is a private school. Maybe it's out of New York. Well, then you're going to be looking for a lot of money from them. And you need to be very familiar with what their financial aid program is, what their philosophies are, and what types of programs could be available to your student. It all depends on that college's specific requirements. If it's a heavily merit-based program, then it'll all be based solely on their admissions application, SAT scores, high school transcripts, community service, whatever they look at. If it's a need-based school, it's going to be heavily weighed on your financial aid forms. A lot of need-based private schools subscribe to a form called the CSS profile, which helps them do a more in-depth analysis of your family's finances, more so than what's being looked at then by FAFSA. Private schools that ask for the CSS tend to be the popular named top-tier private schools. So here in New York, for example, Fordham, Syracuse, Cornell, Columbia, Vassar, University of Rochester, the New School, NYU. These are examples of profile-required colleges. And of course, out of state, your Notre Dames, Georgetowns, Boston colleges, they're all on there as well. It's not a free application. They do charge a fee. It's hosted by the College Board, but now they finally have a direct website link after all these years, cssprofile.org. And you can now get in on the profile. It was available on October 1st, so you can work on it now. Now, if you were nodding off during my talk about FAFSA, you thought that ran a little long, well, I would put you in a coma if I talked about profile in full. It is the mother of all financial aid forms. It looks at 3 years of your income data. What did you make 2016? What are you making now in 2017? And provide them an estimate of what you will make in 2018. It breaks all of FAFSA's rules. Remember FAFSA said, oh, if you own real estate, if it's your primary home, don't tell us about it. Profile says, hey, you own a home, where is it? Westchester County? We want to know about it. When did you buy it? How much was it then? How much is it worth now? What are you paying on it, if you're paying anything on it? Profile is also going to look at all of your assets, retirement assets, regular assets, everything is up for grabs. Does grandma have money for your kids? There's questions about that too. What kind of car you drive? What year is it? Still making payments on it? Are you a business owner? Good. How many people work for you? Oh, just one? Well, let's learn about your business. Here's a supplement. We want your business taxes. You have a subchapter S corporation. We want your K-1s. Now, if you don't know what that is, then okay, you'll have an easier time with profile. But if you know what that is, you're going to have a tougher time with profile. So profile is the great equalizer for private schools because they know that through FAFSA, who's really looking at your adjusted gross income, that you could kind of skate on a lot of things. If you're self-employed, you could pay yourself negative $10,000 this year, and you could qualify for Pell Grants. So the schools say, no, we're not going to let you do that. We want to see your true financial situation, and so we will leave no stone unturned. It also asks about the non-custodial parent. So if your ex-husband who doesn't live with you is, I don't know, Eli Manning, quarterback of the terrible New York Football Giants, their win column may be really low, but his bank account, I'm sure, is very high, so they want to know his income. FAFSA would say, oh no, Eli doesn't live with you, don't worry about him. He has other things to worry about, like winning. So we'll skip his info. But Profile's going to say, no, we want Eli's info. So you might have to answer questions about non-custodial parents, which may be a problem. If it is a problem for your family because of an issue with the non-custodial parent, you have to approach the colleges that ask for it and get their permission to skip it, and they may need some documentation. It's going to be different from college to college. So what you need to do is do your research. Not all schools ask for Profile. Not all private schools do. Some do, some don't. And if you're a family who does have a negative $10,000 AGI and who are going to benefit tremendously from FAFSA, maybe you want to skip Profile schools. Maybe you want to apply to colleges who will look mercifully on your negative $10,000 AGI and say, hey, we're going to give you a lot of aid, versus schools that are going to probably let you get a Pell Grant but not let you get anything else because of that, your business values and all those other things that they're factoring in your property value. So just check their websites. I don't want you to be surprised. A lot of families tend to be excited at the beginning of this process. You apply, your kid's applying to a great school, you get accepted to the school, you're really, really excited, and then comes the financial aid notice. And now you're learning the school wants you to pay 75% of the cost per year. And you're just like, what is this? The way you could find out early on if a school's financial aid program is going to be amenable to your family is basically getting an estimate. All college websites are required to have something called the net price calculator. It's a way of getting your individual family financial aid estimate from a college before you even submit the paperwork. It is an estimate. There's going to be a lot of disclaimers on there that you can't hold them to it, but it will give you some baseline understanding of how their program works. The questions within these calculators will give you some idea of what they really look at when they're evaluating you for financial aid. Some of these calculators, a lot of the questions are academic based. What's your kid's GPA? What are their SAT scores? That would tip me off that this is a merit-based program, and maybe if my income's high, I could feel comfortable at this school, because if my kids' marks are good, if their test scores, their grades are great, I might have a better chance of getting aid at that type of school. If it's an Ivy League school, a lot of people, even last night, a parent complained to me about the Harvard financial aid net price calculator. It's so simple. Well, why? Because it's very simple with Harvard. What do you make? They don't do academic scholarships. If you're smart enough to get into Harvard, you're a Harvard student. They're not going to give one kid more money than another kid based on academics. They're going to look at your money. So they just look at your adjusted gross income, a couple other variables, and they bracket you into a percentage. How much they expect you to pay. You earn this, you pay 25%. You earn less than this, we pay everything, you pay zero. So they'll basically assign you to a bracket of where they expect you to pay, and they pick up the rest of the cost. So use these to get a feel for these schools. Do this in advance of getting the letters, and that way hopefully there's not so much heartbreak when you learn that a school's financial aid program might really suck, might really stink. This might give you a hint that it really stinks, especially if you can't find it. One tip from me is when you're on a college's website, if they bury their net price calculator link, they don't want you to use it. So it is a federal requirement, and that already puts me on a wrong foot with the college, a wrong footing. I'm like, if I can't find your net price calculator, if I have to use Google and Bing to search for your net price calculator, it's a problem because you're probably trying to hide something. Now, don't forget about the Google scholarships and all these other wonderful opportunities, the local scholarship offered by the school district. This is all an X factor, because if you get $30,000 for Google, maybe that'll fill a gap for you where a college didn't give you enough money that you thought they were going to give you, and now this means you are able to pay less or borrow less. Outside scholarship money can have a negative impact on the aid that a school offers you. If you are going to win or receive certain scholarship funding, always consult with the college to find out the impact. Some schools are very liberal with their scholarship policy, where they let you get whatever money you need. They don't make any adjustments. Other colleges may adjust what they've given you based on any outside aid that you're getting. They may reduce what they're giving. They may recalculate your entire financial aid package. It all depends on the college that you're working with. Now, these are just a couple websites out of the many that are out there to find these programs. There's Zinch, CapEx, there's all these wonderful programs, and I know Ms. Burkett does a great job at pushing this information out to families about finding scholarships, so definitely follow that guidance. And local opportunities are the best ones to apply to, because they're easier to get than national programs. Now, also parents, I mentioned already, check your resources with employers and unions, and always check local library systems for any scholarships that are off the web. Where I live in the city, I live in Queens, we have a local scholarship for kids in my neighborhood, but it doesn't have a website application yet. So the Queens Library branch in my neighborhood has the paper applications that kids can come in and get. Avoid scams. With scams, they spoof, people spoof like they're a scholarship organization. Oh, hey, your kids won XYZ scholarship. You get an email, looks really official. There's a link embedded in that email. You link to some page, you're not paying attention where you're going to. Next thing you know, they're stealing your PII, personal identifying information, right? And now they're gonna do whatever they do once they get that, start 30 credit cards in your name or your kid's name, or start collecting your Social Security benefits, or file tax returns in your name, or whatever they do with all of our information. I know we're all compromised now, right? Because Equifax, so we've all basically been hacked. But at least your children who don't have credit reports haven't been hacked yet, so don't volunteer their stuff. The U.S. Department of Ed does keep a list of tips on how to avoid these scams, and you have that in your handout, so you can refer to that. So to close our conversation, financial aid tips just for you to round out. Private scholarships are available now. Some of you are parents of younger children. They can doodle for Google too. The Google Scholarship Contest is a K through 12 scholarship contest. So I have a first grader in my house. She's doodling for Google. She's going to doodle for Google next year, and the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that. She's getting 12 cracks at it. If you're an 11th grade parent who's hearing about this, well, you're going to get 2 cracks at it if your kid is interested in drawing and designing the Google thing. Maybe your kid's not good with the drawing stuff. Maybe you want to draw it for them and submit it and say it's theirs. Whatever you need to do, do it, and do it now. You don't need to wait until they're a senior to start this process. While you're filing for financial aid now, you still may be up in the air about your college names, your college list, your college choices. I mentioned that for the New York application, we're taking hypothetically your top choice in New York. You may not get in there. You could always come back and adjust, and it's the same thing for FAFSA. Same thing for CSS. If you have to add a school later on, you could always log back into the form and update the school selection page to let them know about additional colleges you're adding, or take off a school that you're not applying to any longer. During the winter, they'll review your file. In order to review your financial aid file, students have to apply for financial aid and admissions. So while you may have submitted the FAFSA, if you haven't paid your admissions application fee yet, they're not going to build the file. They're not going to start reviewing anything. When they review everything, it's going to be a process of them. They may ask questions. They may select you for that verification audit. Whatever they need, tax return transcripts, bank account statements, blood samples, you send it to them. Blood samples was just to see if you're still awake. And lastly, make sure that you connect with the financial aid office. So the goal is to get a hold of these financial aid letters as early as possible so you can start working with the financial aid administrators at your college. You could go back and renegotiate financial aid packages. Some schools will do competitive offers with competing colleges. So, the school I worked at was a Jesuit college, and we competed with other Jesuit colleges. And so we would try to give equal packages. Other times it may be because you need an income adjustment. Something happened, you lost a job, or you had a one-time income distribution, and now they want to recalculate, reevaluate, and give you more money. Or there are other things you may want them to consider that may lead to another reevaluation of your financial aid package. You need to have time to do this. The time to choose a college in terms of regular admission is May 1st. If you're not getting your financial aid letters until the last week of April, you may not have time to go back and forth with them. If you can get it by March or at least early April the latest, it would give you a lot of time to connect with the financial aid office at that college and do some work with them, see if they could better that offer. Now, while you connect with that financial aid person, make sure you learn who's your child's individual counselor. That person, if your student does go to that school, would be following the student throughout all those years. Your goal as a parent is to pay what you pay for freshman year should be way less than what you're paying for senior year. Because every year your child's in college, if you're still paying money, you're bugging the financial aid office. My kid is a good student, we need more money. We have another kid going to college, we need more money. I'm retiring from work this year, I need more money. You need to be in dialogue with the school. If you just accept the status quo and keep filling out the loan application every year and just taking out the same loan, they're very happy to take your loan disbursements, and they'll just think that you're fine borrowing. So you have to talk to them every year and see what's the worst case scenario. They tell you no, stop bugging me. Ask them every year. The goal is just to try to get this price down and connect with that financial aid department to do that. So now we're going to open up for a Q&A period. We try to make the presentation as comprehensive as possible to eliminate the need for a lot of questions at the end. We will take up moments for those who need to exit the building, and I think Ms. Burkett wants to say something. Oh, no, she's not.
Just immediately. Let's take questions as you go. Full audience. Here we go.
Let's give a minute for everybody to leave, and then I'll come back to you first.
Thank you.
Just a quick minute, I'm sorry. Thank you. And then I can hydrate.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming out. All right, so it looks like the bulk of everybody's starting to move out. I'm sorry, ma'am. Go ahead with your question.
Thank you.
How many years later did you say? So you'll have 3 kids in college at some point?
When you were saying, like, if you have the question, how many kids are currently in college, I'm only going to have, like, how are they going to know? I have 2 other kids coming up.
At the time when they apply. So let's say your child's going to be a junior in college, you're refilling out their forms. Now your younger ones are going to be freshmen in college that same year. You're filling out their FAFSAs. On each of their forms, I got 3 kids going to college next year. FAFSA is going to divide your resources, your income, your assets by 3 at that point. Before that point, you may not be so happy with your financial aid outcome because they're saying you could focus your resources on the older one because the other ones are younger and they're still not in college yet. But when you have to focus your resources across all 3 children, you might qualify under a completely different income bracket. You might start getting programs that you weren't getting before, and you'll enjoy that for the last 2 years of your older child's college. It'll then drop to 2 in college for the younger one's last 2 years in college, but at least you'll get some benefit of that by having multiple children close in age, yeah.
All right, so they'll know when you call. Okay.
They'll do it through the form, you'll see. The form will address that through the application.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, yes.
Okay, so you said that if you're divorced, the custodial parent is in charge of all this, correct?
Yes,
And the only time the non-custodial parent needs to deal with it is if it's a private school and they ask for the CSS information.
correct. You got it. All right, my job is done. Yeah. Go ahead in the middle.
I have a question in regards to after you fill out the FAFSA, then you fill out TAP, and you can still fill out the Excelsior, like you fill out everything you can.
Everything is kind of, it follows one after the other. Right now, at this point in the school year, you can do FAFSA and you can do the New York State payment application, which will lead you through TAP. Later on in the school year, we'll notify you when Excelsior is available and the enhanced tuition award, depending on what school you list as the top choice in New York and what programs we have. So you'll be able to then come in at a later date, and now you'll be able to request Excelsior. It'll be a different application. It won't be based on your finances at that point because we have your finances. It'll be more of the agreeing to the terms and conditions and all that other stuff.
And that's only by invitation?
Not by invitation. We'll notify you, hey, everybody can apply for it, whoever thinks they can get it. We're just gonna, because you're in our system, you've done the initial application process, it'll be a way for us to reach out to you to say, hey, it's available now, you can do it. If you forget to apply for FAFSA and TAP, then you'll have to, watch the news or something to know that Excelsior is available. And we had that this year. We had students that were applying for Excelsior for this current college year who didn't do anything else. They didn't do their FAFSA, they didn't do their TAP. They just heard about, hey, tuition's free. So they had to go back and do their FAFSA and TAP applications because those are precursors to Excelsior. You have to do those to get Excelsior. So you can take care of those steps now and be ready for that.
Quick question.
Sure.
The enhanced tuition
Oh.
application, award application
Yep.
is different than the Excelsior scholarship application.
Yes, it's 2 separate because one is for private and one is for public. So it's going to have a different process when you're looking at it. It's the same design program, they're sister programs, but one's going to have a drop-down box of names of SUNY schools, one's going to have a drop-down box name of private schools that are in the program. So it's different in terms of that structure, and there's different award amounts as well.
Right.
I'm going to do some front and then we'll come back to the back. And then let's go to the left and then I'll bounce around a little bit. This is always, I hate picking people for questions,
You mentioned
yeah.
about the Excelsior grant, that it doesn't cover tuition, it's only tuition and not room and board?
Correct. The Excelsior Scholarship only pays for tuition. It's a tuition-free program. So we try to give families up to that income level the chance of getting free tuition. But none of our programs, except for the very, very special scholarships, like I mentioned before, deceased police officer, firefighter, first responder, deceased parent in military service. So if a parent recently died in Iraq, Afghanistan, and the kid wants to go to college in New York, those special programs could pick up the other costs, like housing. Excelsior, TAP, the STEM incentive, our teaching scholarships, all are tuition-centric. They're only covering tuition, not the other costs. Let's come back to the middle, and then I'll bounce down to the, yeah, go ahead.
First of all, thank you very much, because this was fantastic and very clear.
Thank you for the compliment.
No, truly. A pragmatic question.
Sure.
You said there is a parent questionnaire in the FAFSA and the student one. Does that help to do it together and be together in the same room physically?
Oh, yes. So it is one form with a part that it starts with the student, and then it then evolves to the parent, goes to the parent, right? It's good to do it together. I know some people brought their kids with them tonight, which was great, because when your kid's off in college and there's a problem with financial aid, we don't call you, we call them. So when I used to work at my school, I'd pull kids out of class. And I'd be like, something's up with your FAFSA. We've been asking you for documentation for a month. I'm about to remove your registration because we can't let you, we're gonna put a hold on you. And the kid would look at me and say, what's FAFSA? Great, this is a great start to our conversation. So yes, if you can have them with you understanding as much as they can, this process, it will benefit them a lot when they're off at college. When they get to college, you know there's this thing called FERPA, where they can't give you information without the child's waiving of privacy rights. Because I wouldn't even be able to call you as a parent if your child didn't sign a FERPA waiver to say that I can talk to you about their financial aid, even though you're on the form. It's still their account, their money, their loan, or whatever it is. So legally speaking, without that waiver, I can't talk to you about it. Can't talk to you about it unless you sign a waiver. They usually give the student the waivers when they enroll at the college over the summer. So make sure he puts your name. Yes, my mom can call. And there's a way that we establish that we know it's you that's calling, and then we can talk to you about anything, grades, attendance, whatever they authorize.
And how long do you think the process of applying for FAFSA approximately, I would say, will differ?
20 to 25 minutes is what we go by on the technical when we put this out, because we have to put this out for, like, you know, public comment and stuff like that. And so the average user is 20 to 25 minutes, but it depends on you, how good you are filling out forms about finances and stuff like that. I do speed contests with my financial aid buddies. We have a few drinks and we all bet each other how fast we can do FAFSAs inebriated. And no, there's a tool that we use that does estimated FAFSAs, yeah, so we're not doing a bunch of fake FAFSAs. Yes?
Sort of a two-part question.
Okay.
One is the first half of it is if there's a non-529 but it's custodial from a grandparent.
So I mentioned that in the presentation, right? So if it's a 529 that's owned by a non-parent, right?
Non-529.
Oh, an account that's your child's money. Custodial accounts, UGMAs and UTMAs, we call them. Those are all the child's money. So if grandma started it for the kid, she's the custodian. They usually get it at age 18 or 21. It's their money. They have to report it on FAFSA. It would be like the 529 where grandma's the account owner. That wouldn't count on FAFSA because that's grandma's money technically that she set up to save for your child's college. But a custodial account that she set up where she's the custodian and the child will eventually own it when they're 18, that's reported on FAFSA as student cash savings checking account balance.
So my next question is then they get rid of that and then they provide it next year? Or for instance,
Yeah, that would be a good strategy, or if grandma can claw it back in her name while she's the custodian of the monies and just hold on to it for the kid for a later time. I mean, you could do whatever you want with your money, you just can't make it disappear unless you want to do a YouTube video of you burning all of your cash in the backyard saying, see, my cash is zero now. Yeah, go ahead, follow up.
my second half question was, I've heard it said at other presentations that need one is really need one. And if you check yourself off as needing financial assistance, that you may be putting yourself in a disadvantage.
So I'm glad you asked that, and I'll kind of rephrase how that works. So I'll repeat it. I'm getting there. Everybody like jumped up like, oh my gosh. So this has to do with need blind versus need aware in admission. So it's not really a financial aid thing, it's an admissions thing, but it has a financial aid component to it. So what this says is that some colleges look at your financial aid request as either a negative or a positive in the admissions decision that they're going to make. These are what we call need sensitive or need aware colleges, where they basically say, okay, we don't care how smart or great your kid is, If they need $70,000 in aid to pay for our school, we're just not going to admit them because they don't give that level of aid to any low-income students or whatever they may be. Now, I could work on in the reverse, where if you're a family whose kid is borderline to the school and you make a lot of money, you could apply for financial aid to show them you make a lot of money, and that might weigh their decision to bring in your kid because they may think you're a full payer. So that's another way to kind of sneak into a school. It could work both ways. Need blind schools are schools that say, we don't care if you apply for financial aid or not, we're admitting or we're denying your kid based on the strengths or weaknesses in the admissions form. It has nothing to do with financial aid. So need blind schools could be partially need blind, meaning in regular decision or early decision they do need blind, but when they go to the wait list they become need sensitive, so they'll look at incomes and they'll look at financial aid requests. So when you hear that statement, oh, they're not truly need blind, it may mean that they have some need aware or need sensitive practices somewhere in the admissions process. The only way you know this is by soliciting that information from the college. Are you a truly need blind school? Do you ever look at becoming need aware when you go to the wait list? Do you ever look at need aware when your class is almost full, when you have accepted a lot of students and you still have more applications to read? Now you want to cull that down maybe to students who can pay versus students who can't. Some schools are straight up always need aware, like Colgate, for example, here in New York. They're always need aware. They're like, if you're low income, you need not apply because we probably won't admit you. They're more upfront about it. And other schools like Grinnell out of New York, they're upfront about this. You could go do some Google searching. Just search, need aware, need versus need blind schools. You'll see some amateur listings. There's no one website that's an authority on all the need sensitive, need aware schools, but you will get some, amateur lists or some college organizations that put this together sort of as, information that they can grab. The schools that are the tricky ones are the ones like you just asked about that are not truly need blind. It'll be hard to know if they really go need aware, and I know a few of them, but I can't share those names with you. Yeah. Yes.
If you're applying to a New York State, not CUNY or SUNY, but a private school.
Yes.
So do you first apply for TAP and then it takes you?
Yes, so TAP is a universal benefit for public or private. So if you're going to get TAP, we could give it to you to go to Cornell, we could give it to you to go to NYU, we could give it to you to go to SUNY Albany, yeah, or wherever you want to go in New York, right? We extend then the supplemental programs if we see you're not getting support from TAP, and we open up those programs later on in the school year. So we'll say, oh, your child applied for, PACE. PACE participates in the program, the Enhanced Tuition Award. So later in the year, if PACE was the school you listed as a top choice, you'd get a notice that the Enhanced Tuition Award is available, and you can apply for schools like PACE.
One choice.
On one choice. So, what some families say is, well, if we're really leaning SUNY because that's where we think we want to go to Binghamton, or we want to just do a state school, take the free tuition, deal with the room and board, then list a state school as your primary choice and file everything for the. Now, you could apply for multiple programs. You can do a supplement for Enhanced Tuition Award and request it for a private. You could do a supplement for Excelsior and request it for a public. But in the end, we're keying off of what you told us in the main application. So eventually, hopefully by May 1st, when you deposit, you give us a final name and you decline any programs that you're not going to need. So we'll say, look, we're approving you for this, we're approving you for that, but where are you going finally? So you can put in for multiple programs across multiple schools. Yeah.
Just a couple of questions. If my ex-husband or ex-mother-in-law has a 529 that I don't know about, was I supposed to have reported that? On the
profile, yes. On the FAFSA, no. Remember, because profile has questions about everything, any money that anybody has for
but
in
not
your.
The FAFSA?
FAFSA, remember, if grandma has this set up for your kid, you wouldn't have to have included even if you knew about
She
it.
doesn't live in the house.
But when she pays the money out, remember that later on when you refile financial aid, if she disperses the money, then it has to be accounted for as a resource that was given to your child.
Also, I don't know if I did a dumb thing, but I already did the FAFSA.
Okay.
My assets are not that much, but I didn't skip the question. Is that going to work against me?
You selected yourself for audit, so
I didn't know. I figured.
yeah, go back and correct it. If they let you skip, go back and just skip it.
I already submitted it though.
You can correct it within 3 days. So if you submitted it 3 days, 4 days ago.
No, it was last weekend.
So then last weekend, it's been 3 days, right?
More than 3 days, you said?
The 4th day after you submit it, you can go back in. So if today's the 3rd day, let's say you did it on Sunday. Today's Wednesday, right?
Oh, I can go
all the days blend into my head when I do all these financial aid nights. The 4th day would be Thursday, and you would be able to log in tomorrow and update. So you can go back to that part and change the question from, no, I'm not going to skip the questions, to yes, I'm going to skip.
Okay. And also there was a question question about my son's driver's license. I'm like, why do they have to know that? I skipped
It's to help verify if they take out student loans. It's not necessary. They could skip it.
It's also a second identifier.
Yeah.
So I just skipped it.
It's really used to
I'm
see
like,
if they're
what is
skipping out on their student loans. That's the truth behind it. You know, they don't really need it. You could skip it.
All right.
Any other questions? We'll go to somebody who hasn't asked yet. Sorry. Go ahead.
On this, it says asset questions regarding debt. They don't care what debt you've got.
For the FAFSA, no, remember, that's not one of the factors that are in there. But for profile is a form that looks at many variables, so your debts would be included in profile. Yeah, FAFSA is going to be driven.
Credit, you can have mortgages that are already done.
It's driven off of your AGI and whatever assets that you're reporting. AGI is the primary driver of what FAFSA thinks you can pay for college. Less than assets, yeah, less so than assets. There was a question behind him. No, not anymore? Oh, yes, go ahead.
If your child's currently a junior.
Yes.
And you complete the FAFSA in 2018 because you have younger children who are in the private school system, can you still add them?
So so the first thing is if you have a junior this year, you shouldn't be doing FAFSA until next October when they're a senior, and you would be filling out the 2019-2020 form.
So you can't get started?
You could get started if you want to see it. So I have some families who are really, really curious. I want to see what this shakes out. Pretend my kid is a senior, fill it out, put the name of the colleges, I don't know, your alma mater, send it to their school. They're not going to review it if they don't have an admissions form. And you'll get a calculation. You'll see what it would be like if, based on your income, what it would shake out to be tonight. You could do that for learning purposes. Now, when you go next year, October 2019-2020's form, they'll just ask you to do a renewal, because once you create and you start filling FAFSAs out for a child, you don't have to start from step one. You'll just be renewing for them every year moving forward. You'll just have to remember to come back in October and do the 2019-2020 form. Maybe you'll be in my presentation if I'm here again, and I'll remind you to do that. All the way in the back, you didn't get to ask a question yet.
Just following up on the custodial question, the accounts, you mentioned that you should liquidate it. Does it matter what amount? Like if my son, if we set it up for him because he was putting in his salary for working and it's not that much, does it matter?
You should report it. If they have $100, they're $20 less eligible for financial aid. So I would just put it, to be honest. They could look at things like earned interest. So if we see a student, and it sometimes encourages us to audit you, if we see, oh, the parent's interest that they earned in 2016 was $300, but you reported you had 0 accounts, you had 0 checking savings. Your child had $20 in interest, but they reported that they had 0 savings or values. That for us will flag you for audit, because we're like, okay, there's an interest, but there's no corresponding asset value for that interest. You should just report it. It won't really bear any huge negative consequence, and it'll help you avoid an audit in the future. We'll go to second. Oh wait, you didn't get to ask a question yet. So then I'll get to people who want to ask another round of questions. Go ahead.
Could you speak a little bit about applying for early decision and the possibilities of getting merit aid?
So, this is, it's a little bit of a kind of a topic that's up in the air depending on the school, right? So there are some benefits if you know your child is strong at a school and you want to be first in line to be considered for their special merit-based scholarships like the Presidential or the Bentley Scholarship, whatever they call it. Then you would have an advantage applying early, because if there's a limited amount of those scholarships, they do allocate X amount of them to go to the early applicant pool, and the early applicant pool is much smaller than the regular applicant pool, so you have a bigger chance of being noticed and being aided with those programs for merit. But just remember, if you get a better offer and you're in one of the binding ones, and then later in regular decision, another school turns around and says, not only are you going to cover your tuition like that other school says they're going to do, but we'll give you some money for room and board. Oh, well, now you're stuck, right? Because that other school may have put you in, you might be in, what is it, early action is the binding one? Early decision is the binding one. So you may be bound by that. Yeah, so there's that drawback as well. But you would, like I said, you're in a smaller pool of applicants. It's easier to get noticed to get aid if there's a limited pool of funding. So you would have that leg up by doing early if you think they're strong at the school. I usually advise families to apply for schools that have excellent financial aid as their early action, early decision schools. Ivy Leagues, because they give a great amount of support to families of all different income ranges, and schools that meet full financial need. So there's schools that promise whatever your FAFSA says, we will give you the difference in free money. So if FAFSA says you can only pay 20 and our school costs 80, we guarantee to give you $60,000 in grants and scholarships. Vassar does that, University of Chicago, there are a bunch of schools that make that promise. I would feel comfortable applying early to those schools knowing that I'm going to benefit by their philosophy, right, by the nature of their program, if it's a need-based school.
What was the term you called those schools?
Need matching schools, need matching. So does a school meet or match your full need? Yeah.
Back to the assets thing.
Sure.
Just really quickly. I know the mutual funds, whatever. And
Money
then
markets, yep.
529. So you're just putting like this number in. You're not breaking it.
Yeah, you're adding all this up, and then you'd only have to...
You could have $5 in a 529 and 100,000.
But they're not differentiating that, right? So if you have a mutual fund that's worth 10 grand and a 529 that's worth $100, you're reporting I have $10,100 in investments, right? And they're and that's all being, sucked up in the contribution, and it's being calculated. You would only have to itemize it if they chose to audit you and they really didn't believe that you were reporting accurate account values. So, private schools are sticklers for this. We get trained for this, and I was an expert at this in terms of forensic accounting, and I would look at, I can see these dividends, I see these interest payments, and I see these corresponding asset values, and I don't believe you're giving me the right amount. So I'll look at whoever pays you your dividends and interest, and I'll ask for their bank statements for the month of October, if that's when you file the FAFSA, and I'll look to see the value, and I'll look to see if you made any maneuvers. So there are things that we can ask for if we don't trust. We know that some parents ballpark their stuff, like, oh yeah, I got about $5 grand in my checking account. We're not so crazy about that. But if there should be 50 grand in there, we could, take issue with that. So don't feel like you needed to get it down to a T. If you did a good job assessing everything, roundabout values, you'll be okay in the process. You had a second question before, and I want to get back to you.
Yeah, going back to this issue of being where
Sure.
do the FAFSA, if you do the paperwork, the school doesn't necessarily see it unless you ask for
Unless you list them. So like if you didn't want to, so if you know that you have a bunch of true need blind schools and you're going to list them, and you're applying also to Colgate and you're afraid about their need aware policy, just don't list Colgate. Colgate doesn't know you did FAFSA for the other schools. If you really want to be mean to Colgate, get admitted to Colgate, then go to your FAFSA, add their name, pull the rug out from under them and say, oh, by the way, we forgot to tell you we're applying for financial aid. See what they do. I've never seen them rescind admission. They may not give you a very generous package, but they might give you something. But yeah, you would generally just not list them. Don't list them on the profile. Don't list them on the FAFSA, but list the other schools, because you definitely want to get them in if they're just need blind schools that you want to be considered for. You could, but you might miss out on a first year benefit, and you may not get the same level of aid. Some schools give the best aid in the first year because they want to entice you and attract you to the college with this aid offer. Second year students, they're like, we don't care if you stay or not. I mean, retention is not as sexy as the freshman class, right? So they want that retention, that freshman class profile to be great, less so than the second year retention students. So you might not get as much money. Yes.
What if you skipped, if I did the FAFSA, but I didn't do the TAP part at the bottom? Can I go
So you
back?
have to wait 5 to 7 days, so you haven't been notified yet. We're going to send your child an email that says you can now come in. What happens is the one-time link is a deal we have with the feds that says we can make your New York State application on the spot by clicking this link. And what we do is when you click the link, we build a New York State application off of your child's info. When you miss the link, we don't build anything. We wait to get a FAFSA record from them like all the other colleges do, and then we build it in our Albany office, and then we then invite the student to come in and apply. So you have to wait about 5 to 7 days for that to happen, and the email is usually sent to the student. Yeah, there's no instant build of the New York application if you miss the link. Yeah.
You said to use the 529 right away, even though the 529 can accrue interest and maybe it's not better.
If you feel like it's weighing down your contribution, right? If you feel like the 529 is significantly increasing your contribution and weighing down your aid that you're getting at the school, then try to eliminate it as soon as possible. It's better to, if you're going to borrow any money, it's better to delay borrowing until later on, where interest won't be carrying for 4 years of college. Maybe it only carries for the last 2 years of college. So you would want to use the money that you can pay up front and then borrow later if borrowing is in the future. Or even money out of pocket. Present value dollars are worth less than future value dollars, right? Because the value of the dollar diminishes over time, economics. So you'd want to use future dollars to pay, not present dollars that are much more valuable. So there's, there's all different sorts of ways that you can approach this.
And the 529 can be used for room and board as well as for tuition?
Yeah, all qualified expenses, even supplies, books, computer if they need it. It's not only for U.S. colleges or New York colleges. You could use it for foreign. You could use it for grad school. It's very, very flexible.
And then one more thing, on the CSS, I actually did call the financial aid office at the university my son wants to go to.
Okay.
And they say, well, the CSS has to be very consistent, so since I'm divorced, he suggested that I sit down with my ex-husband and do it, except my ex-husband lives in California. So there's no such possibility.
The technical process, it asks you to email your husband. So you send him an email and he can do it electronically. And they did that for privacy reasons because we know that some families, he doesn't want to have to share that information with you necessarily if you don't get along. Maybe you're still best friends, I don't know. So yeah, that was poor advice. That was poor. He doesn't need to be with you to do it. Was there any last questions?
I was going to say, I think he's been wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Marathon. It was good though. It was great.
So I'll look at whoever pays you your dividends and interest, and I'll ask for their bank statements for the month of October if that's when you file the FAFSA, and I'll look to see the value, and I'll look to see if you made any maneuvers. So there are things that we can ask for if we don't trust. We know that some parents ballpark their stuff, like, oh yeah, I got about $5,000 in my checking account. We're not so crazy about that. But if there should be 50 grand in there, we could, take issue with that. So don't feel like you needed to get it down to a T. If you did a good job assessing everything, roundabout values, you'll be okay in the process. You had a second question before, and I want to get back to you.
Yeah, going back to this issue of need funding, where
Sure.
do the FAFSA, if you do the paperwork, the school doesn't necessarily see it unless you ask for
Unless you list them. So like if you didn't want to, so if you know that you have a bunch of true need blind schools and you're going to list them, and you're applying also to Colgate and you're afraid about their need aware policy, just don't list Colgate. Colgate doesn't know you did FAFSA for the other schools. If you really want to be mean to Colgate, get admitted to Colgate, then go to your FAFSA, add their name, pull the rug out from under them and say, oh, by the way, we forgot to tell you we're applying for financial aid. See what they do. I've never seen them rescind admission. They may not give you a very generous package, but they might give you something. But yeah, you would generally just not list them. Don't list them on the profile. Don't list them on the FAFSA, but list the other schools because you definitely want to get them in if they're just need blind schools that you want to be considered for. You could, but you might miss out on a first year benefit and you may not get the same level of aid. Some schools give the best aid in the first year because they want to entice you and attract you to the college with this aid offer. Second year students, they're like, we don't care if you stay or not. I mean, retention is not as sexy as the freshman class, right? So they want that retention, that freshman class profile to be great, less so than the second year retention students. So you might not get as much money. Yes.
What if you skipped, if I did the FAFSA, but I didn't do the TAP part at the bottom? Can I go
So you
back?
have to wait 5 to 7 days, so you haven't been notified yet. We're going to send your child an email that says you can now come in. What happens is the one-time link is a deal we have with the feds that says we can make your New York State application on the spot by clicking this link. And what we do is when you click the link, we build a New York State application off of your child's info. When you miss the link, we don't build anything. We wait to get a FAFSA record from them like all the other colleges do, and then we build it in our Albany office, and then we then invite the student to come in and apply. So you have to wait about 5 to 7 days for that to happen, and the email is usually sent to the student. Yeah, there's no instant build of the New York application if you miss the link. Yeah.
Yeah, you said to use the 529 right away, even though the 529 can accrue interest and maybe it's not better.
If you feel like it's weighing down your contribution, right? If you feel like the 529 is significantly increasing your contribution and weighing down your aid that you're getting at the school, then try to, eliminate it as soon as possible. It's better to, if you're going to borrow any money, it's better to delay borrowing until later on, where interest won't be carrying for 4 years of college. Maybe it only carries for the last 2 years of college. So you would want to use the money that you can pay up front and then borrow later if borrowing is in the future. Or even money out of pocket. Present value dollars are worth less than future value dollars, right? Because the value of the dollar diminishes over time, economics. So you'd want to use future dollars to pay, not present dollars that are much more valuable. So there's all different sorts of ways that you can approach this.
And the 529 can be used for room and board as well as for tuition. Yeah.
Yeah, all qualified expenses, even supplies, books, a computer if they need it. It's not only for U.S. colleges or New York colleges. You could use it for foreign. You could use it for grad school. It's very, very flexible.
And then one more thing, the CSS actually did call the financial aid office at the university my son wants to go to.
Okay.
And they say, well, the CSS has to be very consistent, so since I'm divorced, he suggested that I sit down with my ex-husband and do it, except my ex-husband lives in California. So there's no such possibility.
The technical process, it asks you to email your husband. So you send him an email and he can do it electronically. And they did that for privacy reasons because we know that some families, he doesn't want to have to share that information with you necessarily if you don't get along. Maybe you're still best friends, I don't know. So yeah, that was poor advice. That was poor. You know, he doesn't need to be with you to do it. Was there any last questions?
I was going to say, I think he's been wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you.